In this video, we're going to talk about automating some of this configuration that we've been doing so far. So far we've manually built the fabric with layer 2 and layer 2 VNIs. Then we added layer 3, so the layer 3 VNIs. Then we added VPC to it. We did external connectivity. So now we just want to look at a platform Cisco has where we can automate this, do all this kind of through a GUI, quick and easy. So we're going to focus on sort of the last diagram we had where we were doing VXLAN. So we're going to include that in here. So if we can just look at our diagram here, this is what we're going to be using to automate this configuration. So rather than keeping a spreadsheet or something of, all the VNIs you're using, we'll just use this platform here, Nexus Dashboard, to keep track of that for us. And so Nexus Dashboard is a platform that they sell, and on the platform is where you put different applications that you use. So Nexus Dashboard is a platform that hosts other things. And so what we're going to use is called Fabric Controller. And as far as our diagram, how it's going to go is, this is the same diagram from our VPC section, and I have cabled in the management 0 interfaces to this switch here on all of these 5 Nexus nodes, and just to give it reachability to Nexus Dashboard. And I have also went to these 5 switches and defaulted the configuration. So I typed write erase, reload, and so these Nexuses are just like they would be if you were to buy it new and plug it in. They have 0 configuration on it. So we're going to give these switches just a management IP. That's all we're going to do, and then we're going to do the rest from Nexus Dashboard. So let's get into the switches, and so you can see they're sitting here. They're in a POAP loop. So what they're trying to do is a process called power on auto provision, where you can even automate. If I had a leg of Nexus Dashboard, if I had a leg of that into this switch, Nexus Dashboard has a DHCP server where it can give these switches IPs on the management, and then it sends them a script, and then they can communicate with Nexus Dashboard and they can upgrade their code and do stuff like that. I don't have that part set up here, so I'm just going to give them an IP manually on the management 0, and then we'll do the rest from Nexus Dashboard. So since they are all sitting here in this POP loop, let's break this loop. So it's asking me, do you want to abort? I'm going to hit yes, let's abort this. And then this might take a minute, and then we will configure the management 0 and then head over to the Nexus Dashboard. All right, so now it's asking if we want to enforce the password standard. Let's make sure all the switches are caught up. And I am going to enforce the password standard just because when I import them into Nexus Dashboard, let's hit yes. It does kind of require something. And I made one password up here, kind of random. And we'll use this. Now it's asking if we want to enter the basic configuration. I'm going to hit no on this if they're all caught up, because we're just going to do this manually, and we're just going to give it a minimal configuration. So we want the Nexus Dashboard to do the rest of it. All right, so here we can log in. And let's look at our existing config on the management port, which should be nothing. All right. Now let's give an IP to it. I'm just going to use a test network 16. So I'm going to give this one 1. I'm going to give this one 2. That way we can kind of know what they are. All right, now let's add a default route for this because it's in a VRF. So let's go into the VRF and give it a default route. All right, that's really all we need on the switches. I guess one last thing, I'm going to put the host name just to make it easy to see when we bring them in here. So let me cycle through and give them all the appropriate host name. Okay, so that's all we're going to do to the switches, and now we can hop over to the dashboard and let's log in. And again, this is a platform that you install other services on it. So if it loads up here, so we have to begin setup and close it because we're not importing a fabric here, we're building it new. So here's the kind of the admin console, and you can see the services here. And there's an app store where you can download multiple things. This one's the one that we're going to be using for this. This is the one that kind of builds the fabric. It's already installed, so let's open it. And this is where we'll be the whole time. So it's going to be blank because there's nothing here at all right now. So no topology. LAN is where everything is at. And we're particularly going to be in the fabrics. You can see there is no fabric, which is what we're going to create right now. So what we're going to create right now is a container that has the configuration that's going to be pushed to the switches. So if I hit create fabric, let's call this something. Let's choose a template. This is going to help the Nexus dashboard know how to configure, you know, what we put in there, the switches we put in there. Easy fabric is what we're going to be using here. It's going to be for Nexus 9 and 3Ks. If you had Catalyst 9000 switches, you'd use this. If you wanted to use eBGP for the underlay instead of an link state IGP, you'd use this. External fabric would be when you would create this if you're going to connect the fabrics to something externally. LAN Classic would be for non-VXLAN networks. So if you just want to do traditional, and even does VPC as well. And then multi-site domain, you click this whenever you want to have two fabrics connected together, like a DCI, for example. We're just going to stick with the easy fabric. That's our use case. And so here's the container that contains the configuration. So that way, whenever we put a switch in here, it'll know how to configure itself. So really the only requirement is this. We have to tell it a BGP ASN. We've been using 65001. We'll continue with that. And we don't need anything else, but I do want to just quickly go through to show, and some of this should look familiar. So fabric interface numbering, this is going to be the underlay links from the spine to the leafs. What protocol? OSPF. 2 route reflectors. Here's the Anycast gateway MAC. It's going to be the gateway for all the SVIs. I'll change it just for fun, kind of to what we were using earlier. The replication here is going to be for multicast. So this is the range that can be used, you know, under the NVE interface when it maps it to the VNIs to multicast groups. Here's any source multicast, what we'll use, and then here's the VPC section. So in this fabric, if we put switches in here and tell it to make a VPC, it will look at this configuration in order to do that. So it'll make its peer link over the management interface, for example. And then here's some more fancy settings. Protocols. So it's going to use loopback 0. It's going to have a loopback 0 that has an IP on it. It's going to have loopback 1. This one's going to do the in-cap and decap for the VXLAN. They've separated them out here, where in our example, we just made them 1 to do all of it. Advanced. This is mapped to templates within the Nexus dashboard that we don't probably need to mess with. If you wanted to, you know, configure anything extra on the switches, you'd put it here on the command line section, and it would get applied to the switches. We could do maybe an example here would be, I like to make little aliases on the command line. So for example, CLI alias name, let's call this one save me, and what it'll do is copy, run, start. So it's a shortcut. If I ever type this in the CLI, what it actually does is trigger this. So not only do I want this on the leaves, I'm going to put it on the spine, just to show that, you know, you can do it if you want to. Definitely not necessary to do that. And on the advanced tab, while I'm here, I'm going to set this greenfield cleanup option to enable. So what this is saying is whenever I bring the switches in, I don't want to reboot them. I mean, normally I would, but I want to save time. I don't want to wait forever just on the switches to reboot. Resources, this is the IP addressing that the fabric is going to use. So you'd want to put something here or change it to something you're not using already. But this is the pool, you know, when it needs a loopback, it's going to use something in this range. That's what it pulls from. So manageability, we can give it NTPs, DNSs. Bootstrap, this is the feature I was talking about where if we enabled this, it would turn on the DHCP service on the Nexus dashboard. And so that, you know, we could put either a relay here or give it a leg here, or Nexus dashboard would allocate the IPs. And it would send a script to them and it would kind of onboard them automatically. We're just going to skip that one part. And it can also take configurations and send NetFlow. So the only required one is the autonomous system number. So let's hit save and it'll build this container. But this container has nothing in it yet. So we do want to put something in it. So let's go discover our switches, because right now the Nexus dashboard doesn't know anything about the switches. So let's open this, and here's settings related to the fabric that we just made. So we'll build our networks here. We'll build our VRFs here for anything we want in this fabric. So switches, there's nothing here, and we want to add them here. So here's where we're going to reach out and try to find them. So I'm going to go to Nexus 1. I'm going to copy this password and put it here. And I don't want to preserve the config. So they're already wiped, but I'll just have this do everything. So here it's saying it's going to remove everything except for the management, which is good. That way it doesn't lose connectivity. And so now we just let this go out and see if it can find them. All right, that was pretty quick. Looks like it found them all, and then it found that layer 2 switch I have in the diagram, which isn't related to the fabric. So let's select all of them and then hit add switches. And here it says switches will be rebooted, which actually they won't be because of that toggle I made. They just haven't updated that status to reflect that. So here we wait for them to kind of be brought in. Now that they're discovered, we're going to bring them in to the platform. Now they all look to be added, so we can kind of close this. And now here they're showing up under our switches in the fabric. And so far, this doesn't really know the way it needs to be set up. What I mean is, see how Nexus 1 and 2 are the spines here? And then it has everything as a leaf right here. So we do want to set that. That way it knows how to configure the devices. But also, now if we go to the topology, let me refresh this. We can see something here. Now our fabric, that's our container that we've built, and now it has the switches in there. So if we click to go in there, it shows us kind of how they're connected together. And you'll notice all the cables between 4 and 5. There's a few more because that's our VPC pair. Now this doesn't look great because the dashboard doesn't know what's the spine and what's the leaves. And it needs to know that because, for example, a route reflector is a configuration that gets pushed on the spine but not the leaf. So the way you set the roles to tell it what it is just right click it, set role, and then in our case it's a spine. And that'll pop it up here to the top. And then we need to do the same thing to 2. We need to tell it that it's a spine. Because see, everything is a leaf by default. It says leaf current. So I'm going to move this to be a spine. It should pop it to the top here. that looks more familiar, like what we're used to seeing. Now the line here is talking about the management 0. It kind of can tell that they can see each other. That's not really important to what we're doing. But here, all these links here, this is what's going to get auto-configured. So right now there's still nothing on the switches. And now that we've assigned this role to them, this is the spine and these are the leafs. One thing we can do now is, push this configuration to the switches. So if we go back to the LAN fabrics here, let's open this fabric. And then here, recalculate and deploy means that it will calculate everything we've told it to do. It'll turn all that into Nexus code, and then it'll go push that. And I think it'll give us a preview before it does it. That way we can see what it's doing. So here's what it's going to try to do. It detects that everything's out of sync because it knows, what's on the device isn't what's on the dashboard. So there's a disconnect between what we said to be configured and what's actually configured. But to make it go in sync, here's what it's got to push to the switches. So Nexus 1, it's got to push 329 lines to 1 and 2. And then the 3 leaves, it's got to push 512 lines. And you can click that to see what it's going to push. So here, where it turns on all the features, there's where it does the multicast. Here's the BGP configuration. So it's automating all of this for us. Gets the point-to-point links there. There's the point-to-point network type with OSPF. And then we can hit deploy and just watch it go off to the races here and take a few minutes to push all this. And now it looks like it's completed. So it should have pushed all of that to the switches. Let's hop on the switches here and look at Nexus 1. And let's see if it has 2 OSPF neighbors. Okay, 3. Yeah, it has 3. So it's going to 3, 4, and 5. So this automated the underlay completely, looks like. It should have the rendezvous point configuration as well. And I believe it did the BGP on this go around. Yes, so it has automated all of this for us in just a few minutes. So one thing it didn't do, it didn't set the VPC up. We have to tell it to do that manually. So we can do that real quick. So if we let's go to the topology to look at it, into it. And then we already know it's cabled and ready to be, so 4 and 5 are cabled in a way to which they can be the peers. So if we just right click, and then VPC pairing is how we turn this on. And then it's asking me what peer do I want to be with 5, and it needs to be 4. 4 and 5 are what we want to be VPC peers. And then save, and that's all. See, it kind of groups them together, letting us know that, hey, that's a VPC pair. So if we make a change on 4, it'll automatically replicate it to 5 in here. Now, it hasn't actually configured the switch yet. Anytime you make a change in here, you do have to go push it to the switch. And so kind of fabrics go in here, and then this action, same thing we just did. Now it's going to recalculate based on what we've said we want it to do, our intent, and then it'll show us what it's going to push, and then we can push that. In this case, it'll should just be some of the VPC configurations. So here it's calculating it. And everything's in sync except for these 2 and 47 lines to 4 and 5. If we look at it, so here it's using 6 and 7, and it looks like probably as the peer link. So it's putting it in channel group 500, which is the peer link. That's, I think those are the ports when we did it manually. It's turning VPC on. And then, so also here's the loopback 1. Here's the secondary to make this magic work with the VPC. There's that command. So everything behind it will be coming from this loopback from behind the VPCs. So if let's just close and then deploy this configuration. All right, it looks like it pushed. So if I were to just validate this, go to Nexus 4, show VPC. So the peer is alive and the peer adjacency formed okay. And it was still initializing. And so this all looks good. Now we don't have anything configured, any VPCs configured yet, but the kind of the global status of it looks like it's in good shape. So what we can do, we've built the basically the underlay. So now we're ready to pretty much get these devices working, and these devices are already cabled in the right place, but these downstream ports here aren't configured yet. So we can also automate that through the Nexus dashboard. So let's create a network. Let's create one for this PC1 here on Nexus 3. So to create a network, again, back to fabrics and then open the fabric we want to work in. And then here's the network setting for anything on this fabric, or at least that's available to it potentially. So here we want to create. Actually, let's create the VRF first. That way we can put the network in the VRF. And so action, this will create the VRF. So this will be for the orange one. I think I've been calling it tenant 1. Let's just change it up, and I'm going to call this orange. Now here's the layer 3 VNI it's going to use, and it got this, it gets all these settings from when we created the container, like kind of the first thing we did in Nexus dashboard. It's pulling those from there, and this is all we really need. So this is creating a VRF here. And now we can go to the network, and now let's create the network. So I'm just going to call this VLAN 10 because that's what it was before. Here's where I wanted to create the VRF first. That way we can select it. And then here's the VN segment for this network. And I'm just going to say this is VLAN 10. And it also creates the SVI, or the gateway 10.0.0.1 is what we were using here for the gateway. All right, so I must have typed something wrong there. Okay, so that looks good. So if I hit create, now we can see this is available. So it hasn't pushed anything yet. It's just saying this is available. Network status is NA, which means it's configured, but it doesn't exist anywhere. Now to push it, what we'll do on Nexus 3 is you go to this network attachments. You basically attach this network somewhere, and then in the status will show like deployed. And so it's showing for everywhere we could push it. It's detached. We want to push it on Nexus 3. And then if we edit, it will pick specifically where. So we want to attach this network, and this is Ethernet 3 right here. So actually notice it's a trunk. We actually want this to be an access port, so we need to change that first. So if we cancel, if we go to switches, go to Nexus 3, and then links or interfaces, and then here we need to go to Ethernet 1.3, and we need to change this to an access port, access host. These are templates that are built into dashboard that tells you everything you can set this port to be. So we just want it to be an access port. And here's some settings. Port fast, that's good. Access VLAN here is going to be 10. and that changed on me. And we'll enable the interface. And then I'll save that. But then we need to go back and deploy the network to the switch. So in other words, back to networks. This network is existing in the dashboard, but not on the switch. So we'll go to network attachments. There's Nexus 3. Edit that. Let's attach it to Ethernet 1.3, which is now an access port. That's what we want. And VLAN 10. Now, I did put VLAN 10 on the other one, but it's here also. I think I could have maybe just done it here. And so here it says pending. And so now we need to go back to what we've been doing, which is let's go to recalculate and deploy. So it should put all this configuration for our PC1 here on Nexus 3. All right, and here it's telling us it has 66 lines to add to Nexus 3. We can peek at it. There it's configuring Ethernet 1.3 and putting it on VLAN 10, and then it's pushing down a lot of this configuration. So there's our VLAN, and there's our SVI. So let's deploy that. And then while that's deploying, I'm going to get PC1 open here. And we'll see if it can ping the gateway here when it gets done. So which it would be 10.0.0.1. It's almost done. Let's see if it can hit it now. All right, so it's hitting it now. So we successfully, deployed that network to Nexus 3. And that's as far as we can test right now because we gotta create this other stuff. Let's do server 1. That way we can test, VPC connectivity, and we can test making sure that traffic can get off that switch and go to something else. So let's look at how to do the VPC part. So it's going to be similar. So the network is already created, network VLAN 10, and we want to use that. But here we want to create an interface, but it's going to be a VPC interface that will apply to 4 and 5. So create interface. It's going to be a virtual port channel interface. It's asking me to select what pair. We only have one set of nodes that can do it. And VPC ID will be 1. We can leave that. And then here it's going not to be a trunk, it's going to be an access host. So select that. And then make sure the rest of this config mirroring, I can just do that way I don't have to type it twice since these are identical. The member interface is E13. In other words, going down here on both of these is E13. Channel mode active means LACP. BPDU guard, that's fine on here. Access VLAN, we want to put it in 10. All right, and then enable the port channel. I believe that's all we need. So this is creating the VPC port channel. Right now it's creating it in the Nexus dashboard, and then we will push it out. So it says it's successfully added. And then we can recalculate and deploy. All right, so here's what it's going to push. 15 lines to 4 and 5. Take a look at it. There's creating the port channel 1, and it's access in VLAN 10. And it's port channel 1 should have a VPC. Make it into the VPC. So close. Let's deploy that. And hopefully server 1 is still in good shape. It's powered on, and I guess we'll see if it's still working right. Because of the IP 10.0.0.50. Okay, so it's deployed. So let's see if PC1 can ping 10.0.0.50. Okay, so one thing we didn't do is we didn't attach VLAN 10 to Nexus 4 and 5. So we need to go to Networks, Network Attachments, and VLAN 10. See how it's not deployed here? We need to, on Nexus 4 and 5, we need to attach this, and it's going to be to port channel 1 on 4 and 5. So let's save. And now we have to deploy this network. All right, and to look at it real quick, 57 lines. So it's pushing, there's the VRF, and there's our VLAN 10 and the SVI. So let's deploy that. All right, it looks deployed. Let's try to rerun this ping, and it works. So that's good news. Could still be setting up a little bit. There we go. All right, that's better. So if we go to Nexus 4 here and do show VPC, and that looks good. It's active VLAN, port channel 1, success. So now we have the orange tenant almost squared away. Let's do this another port channel, but let's do it down here to this switch just to show a trunk example. So it's going to be a similar process. We're going to create an interface, and it's going to be a virtual port channel interface. Our pair, only one. So 2 means that's going to be the VPC in port channel 2 from 4 and 5's perspective. So it's a trunk. Okay, that's what we want. And config mirroring, it's E15 here. Port channel, we want LACPU. We don't want BPDU guard because here it's connecting to a switch. And then let's just say all to VLANs. So like a little trunk, or we could just do 11. Doesn't matter. And that, I believe, is all we need. Just take a quick another look at it. It's a trunk. E15, LACP, BPDU guard is false. Okay, all the VLANs are allowed. Okay, let's save that. And now VLAN 11, though, does not exist yet. We haven't made that yet. So if we go to networks, there's VLAN 10. We need to make VLAN 11 because that's what PC5 is on. So go to the networks. Let's create. I'm going to call this VLAN 11. And it's going to be in the orange VRF, which is the only one we've made. And this will be VLAN 11. And it also has a gateway 10.11.11/24. Nope, 10.111/24. All right, there's the VN segment that pulled from the container that we built. And I believe that's all we need. Let's create that. There it is. It's not deployed. We do need to deploy it. So let's go to network attachments. Let's go to VLAN 11 here on Nexus 4 and 5. Let's just, let me just go attach. And then I'm going to attach it to port channel 2 on 4 and 5, which is a trunk. All right, and let's save that. So here you can see it's pending. I just did it to 1, but because it knows it's a VPC pair, it does it to both here. And we don't need it on 3. And so let's do a recalculate and deploy. All right, and the 35 lines it's going to push should be our VLAN 11 stuff. So there's our port channel 2 down here, and then there's all the VLAN, and there's the VPC. So let's deploy that. Okay, now that that's deployed, let's see if we can open up PC either 5 or 1. So here's 5. Let's see if it can ping the gateway. 10.1.1.1. All right, it cannot, it looks like. So I don't know if let's check the switch here, and let's see if the port channel is up. So we could check the switch, or it could go to Nexus 4 and just say show VPC. So the switch looks like it's up, at least from this perspective. Let's go to the switch, show VLAN. Let's go back to PC 5. Okay, I think it just was going through a spanning tree convergence because I had just turned it on right here, maybe. I may not have port fast on this. Okay, so I didn't do anything, but it is getting through to the gateway. Now let's see if we can ping from PC 1 all the way to PC 5. And we can. So it looks like that worked. It looks like we've got full connectivity for the orange tenant, and we did all of it automated through Nexus Dashboard. Another thing I guess we could do, I am going to shut server 1 off and power server 2 on, just because my lab is not strong enough to handle both. But we'll do a couple more for just PC 2. So we don't need a VRF for blue because it's layer 2 here. Now, if it was layer 3, we would. So, and if we had external connectivity, if I had this in the lab, we would do a VRF. But in this case, we'll just make an example just to do make a network and make it layer 2 only. So here we've got 10 and 11. They're deployed. Let's make a new network here. Let's call it VLAN 20. And then I'm going to check layer 2 only, which means, the VRF selection goes away because it's not needed anymore. VLAN ID is 20, and I don't have to fill any of this out because there needs to not be no need for a gateway, an SVI, because we're just bridging here. So it picked the VN segment automatically from those container settings. So if we create this, there's our VLAN 20. Now where do we need to attach it? We need to attach it to Nexus 3 and then 4 and 5. So if we go to, let me network attachments here, VLAN 20, Nexus 3, we want to attach it to, this is E14 right here, but let's make it a access port first. So let's go to interfaces. I'll show you how to use the filter here. Device name equals NX3. Then we want to go to E14 here, right here. Let's edit this, and we want to make this an access port, and it'll be VLAN 20. Port fast is fine, and enable the interface. All right, now that we've made that an access port, we can go back to the network that we made and attach it. So network attachments. VLAN 20 on Nexus 3, we want to actually deploy this. So we edit, move this to the attach mode, and then here's E14, and then that's what I wanted to make sure it was an access before we pushed this. VLAN 20 is what it's going to push. All right, and so now we could either calculate and deploy, or we can also attach it to 4 and 5 while we're here, and just do the pushes at once. So VLAN 20, I'm just going to select one because I think it'll catch both because it knows they're in a VPC pair. Let's edit and let's attach. And this will be, and we actually need to make, I don't think we made the port channel. So we need to make the interface here. So create interface. This is a virtual port channel interface. It's going to 4 and 5. Here it's 3. And the port here going to server 2 is E14. 4 on both of them. All right, so policy, this is an access port, access host. So this one was an access host for the PC, but this is an access host also for the server. So that's what we're setting here. And that wiped this away. So it's on E14 on both of these. And we want LACP, BPDU guard is fine, port fast is fine, access VLAN, let's make that 20. And that should be all we need here. Enable. All right, let's save that. Now that we've created the interface, the VPC interface, now let's try to attach the network to it. So try this again, networks, network attachment. So networks is where you create the networks. Whenever you want to put them on something, this is one place you can do it, network attachments. So let me try this one, Nexus 5. And then we attach it here, and we should look for a port channel 3. And here, this needs to go on 4 and 5 because they are the pairs. All right, so if we save that. Now here they're showing pending, so I have this VLAN pending on every switch because it needs to go on 3, 4, and 5. All right, so now if we recalculate and deploy, we should have several lines going across here. All right, so we have, looks like 28, 28, 26 lines here. So 4 and 5 have the same amount of lines, and then 26. We could look at them, but I think we get the idea. We'll look at one of them. We'll see the VLAN 20 get pushed down, and then the configuration for that. And there is no interface VLAN 20 because this is a layer 2 network only. So let's deploy this. All right, that deployed pretty quick. Let's close it and let's check the VPC out. And hopefully this Windows server is okay. I'm not sure. So show VPC here. All right, so it looks like it's up. Now I did turn this one off on purpose. That's the server 1, which we already tested. And I did that so I could turn this on. So it looks like it's in VLAN 20. So let's get on PC 2 here. Let's just test pinging over here to server 2. So ping 20 0070, and that works. All right, so that's I think what I wanted to show here in this video. We just built this whole fabric with all of this connectivity in not too long, just with point and click here. And let's just to show the topology one more time and some of the, so as red because my lab gear is probably not perfect, but here's the the topology. There's our VPC peer. It's kind of gray. This will show our configuration status. So here it's saying that these 3 are pending some kind of configuration. It could be that it hasn't caught up to our last push, but that'll show us the consistency between what Nexus dashboard has and what the gear has. And see, there it goes, success. So it just took a minute just to refresh after our push. So everything's in sync now. So operationally, these probably have some minor problem in the lab here. And most of the time is spent in the fabrics where we created it. Actually, let me show just one more time. If we were to edit this is the settings that it pulls from. So when we put a switch in here and tell it to do something, this is where it gets its configuration. So that's where it got its VPC configuration, all of its IP configuration. It's configured here. That way, whenever we put a switch in here under the switches tab, it pulls from that configuration that we made. And then we create our VRFs here, which we only had to do one. Create all your networks here, but then when you create them, you have to attach them here. And usually you'll pick kind of an interface to attach it to. And so if you want to make sure your interfaces are in the right mode, you can always go here. Here's all the interfaces. You can use a filter to go down here. Interface groups is not something we use, but I think, if you have a similar thing you need to do over and over, you can group interfaces and push that down. Let's see, this is something internal to the Nexus dashboard. Not really sure about that, but that's the basic idea of how we can automate this stuff with the Nexus dashboard fabric controller.